chop saw and talk about some of the issues that they have and how we can fix them. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. But at the same time, if you have any questions around power tools, we can certainly talk about them. Or for those that I've learned in the power tool world, we have folks who are just, focused on brands that they really like and are passionate about. Milwaukee, Makita, DeWalt, and there's a whole raft of others out there. So if you got comments about any of your power tools you want to share, we'd all love to see them as well. If you have any questions regarding outdoor lawn products, we can certainly try and answer those for you. And of course, always if there's any appliance questions, we'll field those as well. But for now, we'll talk about the chop saw. So this one is sort of your basic combination cross-cut miter saw, and it's pretty basic, but it's the one that a lot of people, the general consumer, has for doing their projects. This one's been fairly well used, so we can kind of talk about some of the things that happen with it. The one thing that I see with this one is in the turntable. So for those who are familiar with it, you're able to loosen the lock and turn the table. So you can set it from 45 in either side, which is what makes it really, really a fantastic tool to work with. And our indicator's loose, so we'll deal with that as well. The other benefit as well is you're able to set your blade anywhere between a 90 and a 45. So it gives you a lot of ability for doing molding, for doing different compound cross-cut saws, cuts, I mean. But the one that I have the most repair time on is for this complaint. And you'll notice on this one, it doesn't. When you go to move it, it's a little difficult to turn, and you can hear this grinding. To me, that's one of the most horrible sounds there is. This table should turn smoothly, easily, and you shouldn't be having that grinding, because that's just material that's been caught in the track, ideally sawdust, but it will eventually wear things out, so you wind up losing the smoothness of the tool, and you start winding up creating enough wear that there's some play in the table, and that's just start throwing your cuts off. So it's pretty easy to take them apart and clean them and lubricate them. The only thing it means is at the end you're going to have to realign your saw, which isn't a bad thing to do. There's a lot of guys that aren't comfortable on how to align their saws or don't take the time. And they just wind up wasting wood because they're making cuts that aren't square or aren't straight. So it's good to know how to align it. This particular one is a Delta, but there's lots of different brand names out with this this type of saw, and a lot of different brand names. Some very well known, from the Makita, DeWalt, and all those big brand names that you may find a little bit heavier quality and stuff, to the point even like tradesmen are using it. But they're a great little tool. They do a fantastic job. Most of them are like this one. They have an electronic brake. As soon as you release the trigger, the brake's applied and stops the blade in a timely fashion. It's a safety feature. They have blade guards. Few people don't like blade guards. They like to take them out of the way so that for some of those small, thin strips they got to do, they don't want to have to put that back and put material in. I just strongly recommend safety gear on also. If it doesn't work, it should work. And if it's cracked or broken, you should fix it. That's just from the world of safety and liking to keep only fingers and stuff. I make sure all the safety equipment's working. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to take this guy apart. I'm going to show you what I need to do in order to take it apart, clean it, and put it back together and realign it if we have enough time. So anyway, I'm just going to unplug it, which is a really good thing anytime you're working with power tools that you want to service. So this one's pretty easy in order to take apart. We got to work from the top as well from the underside in order to separate them. But it's pretty well the same process for this one as it is for the other ones. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get this rear fence taken off. And that's just 4 Allen head screws in order to remove that. Pretty typical that you'll see in just about any make is this fence. These fences are really important in order to keep the saw perfectly aligned with your blade. They can get bent and banged around, especially if you've got other folks using your tools and they're kind of chucking them into the back of the truck or knocking them about on the job site. We'll just whip those Allen screws out of there. In case anybody who's wondering, Sarah is here with us as well. She's keeping an eye on the screens for any questions you may have or any comments, or try and keep the lines up so you can see what it is I'm doing.
If you have questions, I will be your voice.
There you go. One of these days, we're going to try and convince Sarah that she needs to jump onto this side of things and do a couple of repairs or just taking stuff apart. So I don't know if she knows that yet, but it's coming.
We're going to call it DIY for dummies.
We'll call it DIY for somebody, but
It's a working
not for
title.
dummies. The cool thing is, you know, as a technician, I've worked on a lot of different equipment. I've done a lot of different repairs on different products, and you know, some I was trained in, some I wasn't. And the stuff I wasn't, there was always, you know, typically somebody you could reach out to kind of guide you along the way. And that's kind of what we as a company try to do, is to give you a resource to find the information on how to do things yourself. Because a lot of it is fairly straightforward, like you'll see today. This is just taking screws out and putting things back in, taking apart a few different things in order to get the machine apart in order to maintain it. And it just means your product's going to, your tool's going to last a long time, it's going to work well, it's going to give you accurate cuts. So, and anybody can do this. Anyway, that's our rip fence taken off. We'll set that to one side. And with that off, you need to remove this little dust shield. So to make it easy, I'm just going to put the head over to one side. Now on some saws, this is a long piece that's almost the full width of the blade cut. And this one is just a little short section. We'll get it out of the way. A little bit of leftover material. Now usually these are full of sawdust, and if you have the opportunity before you go to work on it, you might want to, you know, take an air hose and blow the dust off it, or if you have a shop vac, suck a lot of it off. It just makes it easier. I'm going to take the dust bag off as well, just because, oh yeah, there's some sawdust. And that's pretty well plugged up, so that's good. We'll clean that up after. Just talk about dust bags a little bit. This is pretty common, pretty normal that you see. And if you want to ensure you're getting good dust pickup when you're making your cuts, make sure you empty this out fairly regularly. And if you can, you have the ability, is to use a shop vac and suck out anything that's in there besides what dumps out. Because the little pores inside here will fill up and block the airflow that this machine creates in order to push the sawdust into the bag. So if you want really good performance, you want to take and empty out the bag and vacuum it out so that there's air able to push through the bag and move through the pores. And that's going to enhance the ability for that sawdust to be picked up and put into the bag instead of going into your work environment. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're going to want to look at the underside. So our goal here is that we want to remove the table from the base. We'll remove our little indicator. back. So because we want to separate the turntable from the base, obviously this piece has to be removed. So just take our socket set. Take these right out.
We've got our first question.
Oh, excellent.
So this user has a secondhand miter saw, but it makes a burning smell when they use it. They're assuming that is bad.
It's not a great thing. You shouldn't really, as you stated, you shouldn't really make a burning smell. Most likely, the saw has probably been overworked at some point, and your brushes may be either almost worn out or completely worn out. So now you may be seeing some heavy arcing when the saw is running. And if you are see what we used to call the ring of fire, where the sparking is actually pulling all the way around the armature when you look in the end bell, and that's usually a sign that there's a problem with the armature. One of the windings is probably shorted. One of the commutator bars may be raised a little bit and starting to hit your brushes and creating some of that arcing. The other thing that can happen is if too much current been going through, it's been worked too hard, trying to cut something really big and heavy on a regular basis, the field coil will actually start to overheat. And that smell can be the insulation on the wiring that's in that field coil. And as it starts to overheat, it's going to smoke and you're going to get that burning smell. So you may want to, just look at taking it apart and inspecting the armature and the field coil.
Well, that helps.
Yeah, it's never a good sign, but if you can get it apart and inspect it, if it's just barely starting to show the sign of overheating, you may be okay. If you have to replace the shorted armature or replace your brushes and brush holders, you may be fine, good enough for it to use for a while yet. Or if that field coil is really burnt up, then field coils aren't that terribly expensive, and they're actually not bad to change. So don't think you need to throw your saw away. Just do your pricing up for your parts, and with our site, all you need to do is just put in your model number, and we should be able to get you a breakdown and get a new part for it. Be field coil or brushes or whatever you need.
We have a little promo on as well. So if you are joining in this live stream and you have a repair to do, you can go to partselect.com and enter the code PSLive10. You'll get 10% off your order. So
yeah,
fix up everything in your home.
Bonus. Okay, so now I'm just taking the nut, and there's a series of washers here. Usually two flats and a wave washer. And this is on the actual pivot point in the center. So this bottom bolt and this wave washer and stuff, this is what allows it to actually have a little tension when it rotates, so that it just doesn't swing in and have a bunch of play in it. So it actually applies a little bit of pressure onto that center bolt, and it still allow it to pivot. So now we should be able to separate. Yeah. So on this saw, you can see now we've got a bunch of sawdust and material down on this channel. And again, this is what rides against it, and you can't see it, but if you run your finger on it, you can feel how rough that is, because it's been having to try and rotate on some of that abrasive material. So that's where that noise is coming from, and that's where you start to lose your smoothness and swinging your saw. So all we're going to do with this guy is you just have to clean out that channel, and we'll put a little bit of lubrication in there and then put it back together. On some saws, they actually give, there may be a Teflon or a nylon ring in here that it actually helps to pivot on. If that's the case, it's the same thing. You're going to want to clean that, and then you can apply a little bit of lubricant, and put it back together. Put it back together, realign it, you'll be good to go. This, what we're doing today, is kind of something that falls into normal maintenance. In one of the repair shops I've worked in, where we did a lot of these tools, this was pretty common. In fact, we even had a lot of our regular contractors that would bring their equipment in on the off season and have us perform the maintenance on their cross-cut miter saws so that they'd be good to go. And this was the most common thing we'd have to do, was take them apart, clean this, and then realign the saw. And the nice thing for them is, while we had it and realigning it, we would be able to check it and make sure that everything's straight, that the back fence isn't bent, or that there's not some other problem that's keeping it from having accurate cuts every time they need to use it. I use it just when I talk about lubricating this with a little bit of grease, it's really just a little tiny fine amount. You don't want globs of grease in around when you're doing this, because all that's going to do is just take any material that does get in there and just make it gummy and fluff even quicker. So it's just a very, very thin film. I just put it all the way around the edge.
Was the bit you sprayed just compressed air, or was that a lubricant too?
Actually, that was just compressed air.
Okay, so just cleaning everything
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, good question. Normally in a shop environment, you would just take your air compressor, use that to blow that out, or you know, you can use a shop vac and suck out most of that stuff. But this is just this white grease I'm using is just a lubricant that it's almost like a high temperature lube. It doesn't mind if it gets hot. It doesn't run. When it gets warm, it doesn't turn into like a liquid and flow everywhere. It still stays pretty much intact where it is. It's actually, this particular stuff, it's like a lubricant, but it's not. It's actually, I use it for washers for gear head assemblies. And you also find it like KitchenAid mixers, because it'll withstand the heat and it won't get into being, really goopy fluid and, leak everywhere. So it just works really well for that. Okay, so we're good to reassemble. So again, it's just a matter of bringing the base into place. Line up. Put our retaining nut on it, and again, it's a flat washer, a wave washer, another flat washer, and a nut. Now you'll notice this nut, I don't know if you can see that up close or not. It's basically looks like an acorn nut. It's like an aircraft locking nut. which means it's got a nylon ring built into the top of the nut. So it works like a lock nut. It actually applies tension to the threads so that when you tighten this up to the setting you want, it stops that nut from coming loose from vibration. So this isn't a nut that we're going to, come on Jim Dandy and snug it right up super tight, because it needs to be able to have our table pivot. Now, if I tighten it too much, then this becomes really hard to rotate. If I put it too loose, this just flops around and we start to get some play in the table, which we definitely don't want to have. And so it turns smoothly and you don't have any play. So that's the ideal setting. So you can still hear from the movement, but you're not getting that grinding sound. So we've gotten everything under there that we wanted out.
We've got our old friend Nikki joining us. She's just tuning in. So for those that are joining, do you want to give a quick recap on what we're working on?
Sure. So today what we're talking about is repairing a crosscut miter saw, because when you would go to try and adjust it from one side to the other, it was very stiff and it was almost like grinding. So what we're doing is actually taking it apart, cleaning it, and reassembling it. And on this type of saw, when you do take them apart and do this sort of maintenance, you have to redo your alignment so that you make sure you're getting your straight 90-degree cuts, and as well getting your 45s when you want your 45s. So it's good general maintenance. And as well, we're answering any questions anybody may have on power tools, outdoor lawn and garden equipment, as well as any appliance questions. So it's kind of a free-for-all day.
We've got another question asking how often this sort of maintenance should be done on your saw.
Yeah, great question. And really, it depends on the amount of use you give the saw. So if you're somebody who's doing a lot of work and using this tool on a regular basis, then I would recommend doing this once a year. If you're finding, because you've got heavy use, that you're getting that situation where it's hard to rotate and it's stiff and grinding, then you may have to do it sooner. But typically, we would do maintenance on contractor saws once a year. Okay, I'm snugging that indicator down now just so that I know it's not, but I may have to do that adjustment when I go back, realign the saw. I may have to move that in order to make it accurate. I'm just cleaning up the fence a little bit. Up on the table. And again, this saw is not a super expensive saw. This is just one that you pick up at your, building supply store. There's certainly a lot of other models out there that are more expensive. So, depending on your needs and the type of work you're doing, you may need to go for something that's, going to be able to be given constant use and give that great performance. This one is just more of a, when you got that one project this year that you need to do, make a few cuts, it's ideal.
And the only equipment we've had to do this maintenance so far has been an Allen wrench, a rag, and some grease.
Yeah, pretty much a Phillips screwdriver for these couple of screws, Allen wrench for the back fence, and we had to use a socket where you could use a wrench as well to take that retaining bolt on the bottom.
And
So,
if you own a saw, you probably own all of that already.
well, and that's true. Other people may just have, just use their saw when they use it. When they're done, put it away and never give a lot of thought to it. And that's where kind of some of the stuff helps when you do have an issue. And it's kind of like, I don't know what to do. Why is it making that sound? Why isn't it cutting straight? And try to help you with those situations. So again, our back fence goes on. Put in our bolts. These saws can be a real time saver when you're doing a project. Whether you're doing framing work where you're just cutting a bunch of studs, or if you're doing, trim work and you got a lot of molding and you need to make a lot of unique cuts in order to have it fit corners, outside and inside corners. They're really fantastic for that. And of course, depending on what you're cutting and what you're looking to do will depend on what kind of blade you're going to have on it. This blade is just a basic combo carbon tooth blade. It's great for cutting studs. It's not probably the best choice if you were looking to do moldings and stuff because it's just going to rip the edges a little bit too rough. But there's plenty of variety of blades, even ones for cutting metal or ceramics. The saw is able to do all of that sort of thing. So I'm bringing these screws in on the fence, but I'm not tightening them right up. I'm going to leave a little bit of play so that we can align our fence up. Make sure it's going to be nice and straight.
All right, we got a good question from our YouTube audience. If you accidentally cut the power cord to a saw, is it possible to repair? There was a brief spark as the blade cut the cord.
Absolutely. There's not a problem in getting a new cord for your saw and for you to change it. They're pretty easy to do. But if that's the first time you've nicked your cord, you've done really well, because one of the most common repairs we would do in the shop, aside from maintenance, is actually replacing cords, because it just happens when you're working and trying to get stuff done, you're moving wood through your saw and you're changing position and whatever. Cords do tend to get in the way, and they will get cut. But yeah, just if you've got your model number, you can go to our site and you should be able to find your power cord very easily. And like I said, they're pretty straightforward to change. And at the same time, depending on how much use you have on your saw, you may want to consider popping off the end cover and looking to see what condition the brushes are in. And if you're doing that maintenance, it's a good time to change those as well. Okay, we still got a little bit of play, which is great. So what I want to do now is I have a tri-square. And I have my full-size framing square. So one of the things I like to do when I'm doing this kind of maintenance and having to do realignment is to be sure that things are straight and not bent. I kind of know the history of this saw, so I'm not expecting any problems, but it's quite common for heavy use, especially for contractors or somebody who's had their pool's bored and get chucked around a bit, that these fences get bent. And even on these inexpensive ones, this material is cast as compared to being of a stronger material you see in some of the more expensive saws. But even if you wind up jamming a piece of wood, sometimes there's enough effort that can actually bend this fence. So it's a good thing you need to check right off. So what I'd like to do is just a straight edge right across the fence. And I'm just going to look down on it, and I'm making sure that my square is touching straight across both pieces without any gaps. If there was a gap, and that would mean this fence is bent one way or the other, that would be pulling it out on one side or the other, and there would be a gap. And if that's the case, that fence is bent, that means when you try to do a cut in the fences like this, it's almost impossible to be able to set your 90 degree. So if I was to try and set my blade 90 degrees to this side of the fence and get it set up right, if this is bent when I go to the other side, it should be already set for the 90 degrees. It won't be. It'll be out a bit, and you can fiddle and adjust all you want, but if this fence is bent, there's nothing you can do except either replace it. And the material this is made out of is not even something you could comfortably say, oh, maybe I'll just give it a whack with a hammer and get it back in place. Most often they'll crack, and you have to change it anyway. So the next thing I want to do, we're going to snug that fence right down. Now that I know the fence is straight, is to check and make sure I actually have my 90. So I'm going to snug that up. So what I'm doing is putting it into the detent for 90. Tighten this up. I didn't tighten those ones up. That was my mistake. So let's fix my mistake. Tighten this up. I get talking, I get ahead of myself. Can you hear that squeak? I hate that squeak. We're going to make that squeak go away before we're done. That's just plain annoying. Okay, so we got our nice smooth. We've got our indents 45, 30, 22 and a half, 0, and the same thing in the other directions. Okay, so we're going to set it for 0. We'll snug it up so it's locked in. We're going to take our square. Now in a real sharp setting, today we're going to be checking with the blade that's on the saw. In a real sharp setting, they're going to have blades that they take yours off and they put their test blade on, which is just a smooth disc of steel, not a seal, of steel. And what it does is it's completely flat and straight. So if this blade was bent or because it has carbide teeth, it makes it a little trickier. So in a full-blown shop, they're going to have those testing blades that work for doing this. So what I want to do is just bring my saw down. And then I'm going to bring my square in. And what I'm looking is to see if I am square on the blade. So because this is a carbide tip, I just need to adjust my blade so that my square is not against the teeth. So that I'm actually just on the blade. So I'm actually on the, there we go. So it's not too bad. I'm out a little bit. Just lock this down. So it may be a little hard for you to see, but right now I'm not perfectly at a 90. And to get that, I need to move my fence just a little bit. That's worse. This is better. There. So I've got my 90, I'm going to snug down the screw on both sides. And then I'm going to check the other side to make sure that I have 90 on the other side as well. I should, if my fence is straight and my blade is straight, I should have 90 on both sides without any fuss. And I'm good. I'm perfectly straight. It's probably a little hard for you to see, but I'm perfectly straight along the edge from the front of the blade to the back of the blade. So my fence is straight, my 90 is set, so now I can comfortably snug down that back fence, and I know I have my 90. So you can see none of this is requiring any really special tools other than an Allen wrench, but most saws come with all the Allen wrenches that fit whatever Allen head screws are on the saw. So if you have a saw and you bought it new, you should have the wrench, and you should have your owner's manual as well. And most manuals will have all your alignment information in it. So they'll walk you through step by step on how to make sure your saw is aligned. And for anybody who's thinking of getting one of these saws, I don't think you'll be disappointed when you get it and put it into operation. They're just so handy and they make work so much easier. And they do a really nice job. But if you're new to it and you get it new and you haven't used it before, read through the owner's manual towards the safety tips. They're really important, and they can actually, save fingers and wrists and hands, because it is quite easy to have something terrible happen if you're rushing and not knowing what you're doing. Okay, so now I'm going to check and make sure that my 45s are okay. So I'm going to take my square and remove the ruler part from it. Now, what I want to check is my up and down. Make sure I've got a perfect 90 on my blade, so that when I make that adjustment, and I ask the saw to lean over one way or the other, that I have my 90 and I have my 45. So if we were looking at the 45, I'm just going to bring my square over, bring the 45 in, and I should be, when it comes up against the blade itself, it should be touching it all the way along the length without any light being through. If I was out of adjustment, like that, or like that, I would have to adjust it.
Get us here.
I'm just going to bring my blade into position. I'm going to bring my square in, put it right against the blade, and if it's perfectly flush on the blade, then I know my 45 is good. Bring it into the 90 position. And check it again. And check it in another position and see that I'm right on my 90. And I am. So that's fantastic. And I'm not surprised, because I pretty well had everything back in place from where it was. But if I did have to adjust it, it's actually very easy to do. They have a couple different adjusting bolts. One on this side, which is your stop. So if I'm coming off of, let's say, a 45, and I want to come back to my 90, if I'm not right on 90, then this is my adjusting screw here. So I can raise this up or down so that this either stops here, or stops there, or stops lower. So I can really fine tune my saw to make sure I'm getting that 90 degrees this way. Same for 45. When we come up to this side, again, there's another screw, another bolt head that is adjustable. So that when I come over, if I'm not at 45, then I can adjust this side to give me the perfect cut. So it's just that easy. It takes a few minutes to do in order to make sure you got them in the right setting. But once they're done, you tighten the lock nut and you're all set. You're ready to go.
So I think your demonstration just answered this viewer's question, but they were looking to make a jig for cutting complex miter angles.
Right.
Their saw only does one axis.
Oh, okay. So by one axis, you just leans to one side, or it just does straight cuts.
We'll find out. They're looking to repair a pool table.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then this would do it. If you're looking to get those corner cuts, this saw would allow you to get that. This saw would. If yours only is a chop saw as such, then it's not going to be able to do that for you.
They posted a follow-up comment saying, I guess I need to buy that type of saw.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I guess that answers the question.
There you go. Yeah.
Getting a few more angles.
Yeah. Yeah, no, these are rules for doing that sort of stuff. So let's talk about that squeak that I just like. So inside here, there's a big spring. So I'm just going to try and angle things so you can see it a little better.
Right. We're looking for a spring?
Yep. Right
Everyone see a spring.
right where my finger is.
Okay.
Okay, so what's happening is when you open and close it, that spring is what's making the noise. Where the bands of the metal of the spring are together and they're being forced to tighten or expand again, they're just rubbing against each other and they squeak like the devil. And it just makes a old guy like me go crazy. So I'm just going to blow it out a little bit to get any sawdust out of there. And again, if you have an air compressor or an air tank, that's your easiest way to clean that out. It just does put a lot of dust into the air, and try not to do that here in the studio because it winds up getting all over the camera lenses and the camera people get all upset, and rightly so. Okay, so now I'm just going to take a little bit of silicone spray, and I'm just going to spray that spring. Just a little coating like that. And I'm just going to work the spring. Takes a little bit for the lubricant to work its way around the spring. As well, I'll also give my pivot point here for my blade guard a little squirt too, just so that everything turns nice and free. see it's getting less and less as that lubricant works its way around. So there, that's your saw so that it now turns like it should. It's aligned and it's nice and smooth. And you can be sure that when you set it for 90, it's 90. When you set it for your 22 and a half, it's good, your 30, and all the way over to your 45 in either direction. And it just, when it's that smooth, you know it's just easier to use. You know how to align it. You know you're going to have good straight cuts. So you can do multiple cuts, whether you're switching from 45 to 90s on a regular basis. You know you're going to have a good cut at the angle you want without having to get out and put your square on it every time to make sure everything goes right. Or you got to put your joints together and or inside or outside corners and things don't line up. There's nothing more frustrating because you're just wasted wood, especially if you're doing moldings and stuff. So check your alignment, realign it if it needs to be. Clean out your dust bag. Now, some folks have these mounted into a bench, and they'll actually have them hooked up so they don't use a bag. They have a hose that goes to their dust collection systems, so that there's practically no sawdust when you're doing a bunch of cuts. Those setups are just awesome. And since we're talking about maintenance, it's a good time just to inspect your cord, especially as the gentleman mentioned that he nicked his at one point, is just visually inspect it, run your hands over the cord to see if there's any spot where there's a nick or a cut. So these cords are all double insulated. So if you've sliced the outer casing but haven't touched any of the insulation on the wires inside, you can wrap them with electrical tape, good and tight, in a few layers. And good quality electrical tape has the same amount of electrical resistance as this outer covering, so you're perfectly safe. If you've gone down into it far enough that you're starting to see a little copper showing through, then don't mess around. Replace the cord. They're not that expensive and they're not that hard to change.
We'll do a final call for any questions, whether it's power tools, appliances, DIY repairs. We're back again in another 2 weeks with one of these live streams. So if you run into any issues, we can help you in the meantime.
Send us a note. And for any of you folks out there that have some power tools that you're really fond of, let us know what your most favorite power tool is, and what you do with it, and what your favorite brand is. And for me, this may not go over well, but for me, I love the Makita tools. Part of that is because I worked with them for a while in the repair shop and really get to know them inside and out. And it was a ton of fun being out at the front counters when customers would come in and you get a Makita guy in, you get a Milwaukee guy in, you get a Dewalt guy in all at the same time, and they're all just chucking crap at each other about how terrible each other's tools are. And yeah, it's just a ton of fun. But you know, some people like certain sports teams, some people like certain power tools. I'm just a bit of a Makita fan. Like me or hate me. Either way, that's my day. Anyway, thanks very much for watching this. I hope that you found it interesting and maybe even helpful for what you want to do, what equipment you've got. But as Sarah mentioned, if you've got any questions on any of your power tools, your lawn and garden equipment, or your appliances, just send them in to us in the comment section and we'll try and get back to you as quick as we can. And if not, we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next live stream.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Yeah, have a great weekend. Bye now.